The Brave Little Rabbit, a tale of courage. Once upon a time, in a lush green meadow, there lived a little rabbit named Oliver. Oliver was not like the other rabbits in the meadow. While his friends hopped around fearlessly, darting from burrow to burrow, Oliver was small, quiet, and often afraid. He feared the wind when it howled at night, the tall trees when they cast long shadows, and especially the deep, dark forest that bordered the meadow. The forest, known as the Whispering Woods, was filled with mysterious sounds and unknown creatures. The other animals would tell stories about the woods, some true, some made up, but none of them dared to venture too deep inside. It was said that the Whispering Woods were home to many strange things, like glowing eyes that followed you in the night and paths that twisted in ways you could never escape. Despite his fears, Oliver loved listening to stories about the forest, especially when his grandmother, a wise old rabbit, would tell them. She would sit by the fire each evening, her voice soft but full of wonder, and share tales of great adventures. Her favorite was the legend of the Guardian Stone, a powerful relic hidden deep within the forest. According to the legend, anyone who found the Guardian Stone would gain the courage of a lion and the strength to face any fear. But no one had ever seen it, and many believed it was just a myth. One crisp autumn evening, as Oliver and his grandmother watched the golden sun dip behind the horizon, she spoke softly, "Courage, my dear Oliver, is not the absence of fear. It's the strength to keep going, even when you're scared. Remember that." Oliver thought about her words often, but he couldn't imagine being brave like the heroes in her stories. He preferred the safety of his cozy burrow, far from the unknown dangers of the world. Then one day, something happened that changed everything. ####. A sudden disappearance. Oliver had a best friend named Rosie, a bright and cheerful rabbit who was always full of energy. Rosie was the bravest rabbit Oliver knew. She would explore the farthest corners of the meadow, leaping over streams and sneaking through the tall grass without a care in the world. While Oliver admired her bravery, he couldn't help but worry about her whenever she went too far. One afternoon, Rosie didn't return from her usual exploring. As the day turned into night, the other rabbits in the meadow grew concerned. Oliver's heart pounded with fear. He asked around, but no one had seen her since the morning. A cold wind began to blow, rustling the leaves in the trees, and the animals whispered to one another that perhaps Rosie had wandered into the Whispering Woods. Oliver's ears twitched at the thought. The woods were no place for a small rabbit to be alone, not even Rosie. He tried to stay calm, but his mind raced with worry. What if Rosie was lost? What if she was in danger? Suddenly, without thinking, Oliver stood up. "I'm going to find her," he said, his voice trembling. The other rabbits gasped. "You? But you're so small. And the woods are dangerous." Oliver's paws shook, but deep down, he knew he couldn't let fear stop him. Rosie was his best friend, and she needed help. "I may be small, but I can't leave her out there alone." His grandmother, who had been silently listening, gave him a gentle nod of encouragement. "Remember, Oliver, courage is found when you face your fears." With those words echoing in his heart, Oliver set off toward the edge of the meadow, where the trees of the Whispering Woods loomed like giants. ####. Into the Whispering Woods. As soon as Oliver entered the woods, the air changed. It was colder, darker, and the shadows seemed to move in strange ways. The trees whispered to one another as the wind blew through their branches, making eerie sounds that sent shivers down his spine. But Oliver kept moving. His small paws padded softly on the forest floor as he listened carefully for any sign of Rosie. The forest was filled with strange noises, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, and the distant hoot of an owl. Every sound made Oliver jump, but he reminded himself of his mission. Rosie needed him, and that thought kept him going. After what felt like hours, Oliver came across a small clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center of the clearing stood a great oak tree, its bark gnarled and ancient. As Oliver approached, he noticed something strange. The tree had a small door carved into its trunk, barely noticeable unless you were looking closely. Curiosity tugged at Oliver, and despite his fear, he nudged the door open. Inside, the trunk of the tree was hollow, and there, sitting on a soft bed of moss, was an old, wise-looking turtle. "Ah, a visitor," the turtle said slowly, peering at Oliver with kind eyes. "What brings you to these woods, young rabbit?" "I'm looking for my friend," Oliver replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Her name is Rosie. I think she's lost in the forest." The turtle nodded thoughtfully. "Many come to the Whispering Woods seeking something, some seek adventure, others answers. But beware, for the woods will test your heart." Oliver swallowed hard. "I just want to find Rosie." The turtle smiled gently. "Courage is a powerful thing, little one. It can guide you through the darkest paths. I cannot tell you where your friend is, but I can offer you something that may help." With that, the turtle reached into the moss and pulled out a small, glowing pebble. It shimmered softly in the dim light of the hollow tree. "This is a heartstone," the turtle explained. "It will glow brighter as you get closer to what you seek, but remember, true courage comes from within, not from magic stones." Oliver took the pebble, its warmth comforting in his paw. He thanked the turtle and set off once more into the woods, the heartstone's faint glow lighting his way. ###the shadows of fear. As Oliver ventured deeper into the Whispering Woods, the heartstone grew brighter, guiding him through the twisting paths. But the further he went, the more the forest seemed to change. The trees grew taller and thicker, blocking out the moonlight, and strange shadows flickered at the edges of his vision. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the woods, freezing Oliver in his tracks. His heart raced as he scanned the darkness for the source of the sound. Out of the shadows stepped a large, menacing wolf, its eyes gleaming in the darkness. Oliver's legs trembled, and he wanted nothing more than to run. But then he thought of Rosie, alone and scared somewhere in the forest. He couldn't run. He couldn't give up. Mustering all his courage, Oliver stood tall and faced the wolf. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice shaking but determined. The wolf snarled, but as it stepped closer, the heartstone in Oliver's paw began to glow even brighter. The light grew so intense that the wolf recoiled, blinded by its brilliance. With a final growl, the wolf slunk back into the shadows, leaving Oliver standing alone in the now quiet forest. Oliver let out a shaky breath. He had faced his fear and come through it stronger. Finding Rosie. With renewed determination, Oliver pressed on. The heartstone's glow grew stronger with each step, and soon, Oliver heard a familiar sound, a soft whimper coming from a nearby thicket. "Rosie?" Oliver called out. "Oliver," came a faint reply. Pushing through the bushes, Oliver found Rosie huddled beneath a tree, her fur ruffled and eyes wide with fear. She had wandered too far into the forest and had gotten lost. "Oh, Oliver, I didn't think anyone would find me," Rosie said, her voice trembling. "I couldn't leave you out here," Oliver replied, offering her a comforting smile. "Come on, let's go home." Together, they made their way back through the forest, the heartstone lighting their path. As they neared the edge of the woods, the trees began to thin, and the familiar sight of the meadow came into view. The morning sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the grass. ###a new kind of courage. When they finally returned to the safety of the meadow, the other animals gathered around, amazed by Oliver's bravery. "You went into the Whispering Woods all alone?" one rabbit gasped. "You really are brave, Oliver," another said. Oliver's cheeks turned pink with embarrassment, but he smiled. He didn't feel like a hero, he had simply done what he had to do to help his friend. Later that evening, as Oliver sat by the fire with his grandmother, she looked at him with pride. "I knew you had it in you," she said. "You've discovered the truth about courage, Oliver. It's not about being fearless, it's about standing up even when you're scared." Oliver nodded, understanding at last. The Whispering Woods had tested his heart, but he had found his courage, not in magic or in the Heartstone, but in his love for his friend and his determination to do what was right. From that day on, Oliver no longer feared the shadows or the howling wind. He had learned that bravery wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest, it was about having the heart to face whatever came his way, no matter how scared he might be. And so, the brave little rabbit lived happily in the meadow, knowing that no challenge was too great as long as he had courage in his heart. Moral of the story: true courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to face your fears and do what's right, even when you're scared. The end.